Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto was the son of a goddess. Kurama had a jutsu to save him. The only problem? It didn't quite work as intended. And now Naruto is reborn in a world where gods and monsters roam the lands. Thankfully, this time around, he has a mother with the most striking silver eyes, the same color as the moon. Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 7, Love's Hatred. Out of all the Olympians, Aphrodite was the one Naruto was the most wary of. Firstly, Artemis and Aphrodite aren't exactly on good terms. A little known fact is that the intensity of their conflict rivaled that of Poseidon and Athena's. Aphrodite was the goddess of love, and Artemis swore off all love. That in itself wouldn't have offended Aphrodite that much, after all, there were numerous other maiden goddesses. However, not only did Artemis swear off love, but she also required her hunters to swear off all love. To Aphrodite, that was unacceptable. To her, it was an active attack on her domain. It would be as if Aphrodite had a group of followers who actively destroyed forests. After all, by requiring the hunters to swear off love, Artemis was essentially destroying their chances of falling in love. She had also said numerous times that love was useless, and love will only lead to despair, phrases that didn't exactly endear herself to Aphrodite. The hatred was mutual. On multiple occasions, Aphrodite had used her magic to cause a hunter to go astray and fall in love against her will and break her oath. And Artemis could not allow a hunter who broke their oath to remain with the hunters, and so she was always forced to abandon the hunter. Given the fact that the hunters were essentially Artemis's family, it was understandable exactly why Artemis despised Aphrodite so much. While Aphrodite couldn't do anything to Artemis directly, if she found out that Naruto was Artemis's child, it wouldn't be pretty. If Naruto was lucky, she would just tell the other Olympians and force a vote to blast him out of existence. After all, his very existence as a male child of Artemis goes against the natural laws of the world itself. He is something that should not exist, an abomination of the highest degree. If there is one thing that nearly all the gods can agree on, it's that they don't like change. Of course, that would only happen if Naruto was lucky. Besides, if they did vote to blast him out of existence, Naruto was confident enough that he would pass the vote. And even if he was voted to be blasted out of existence, he could always pull out Six Paths Sage mode. However, that would be a double-edged sword, because once it's revealed how powerful he truly is, the gods would undoubtedly think of him as a threat and try to dispose of him. Naruto did not want to be the cause of a war within his family. Ever. Not unless there was no other choice. If Naruto was unlucky, however, well, Aphrodite was the goddess of love. Making Naruto's life miserable could be done very easily. Next to Naruto, Percy made some weird choking noises, as if he forgot how to breathe. Naruto rolled his eyes and elbowed him in the gut. "Ooh, thanks, Naruto," Percy said sheepishly as he regained his senses. Naruto didn't blame him. Even as he watched, Aphrodite's features shifted to pink hair and green eyes. Sakura. Her appearance constantly shifted, growing more and more perfect and beautiful by the second. Genjutsu, perhaps. Naruto idly wondered if it would be rude to stab himself with a kunai, but decided against it. He had to keep a low profile. It was bad enough that Aphrodite asked for him specifically. He didn't know why, and quite frankly, he didn't want to know. He just wanted to get away. Who is Hinata? Even that innocent question sounded seductive in Aphrodite's voice. Naruto tensed slightly. Ah, right. In his initial surprise, he had blurted out her name. She's a... He already told Percy that the only people he has met in his life were Apollo, Artemis, and Hestia. She's a video game character. Aphrodite frowned. Oh. I see. Then she turned back to Percy, ignoring Naruto entirely. "Percy, hold this, please." Aphrodite handed Percy a polished mirror. She leaned forward and dabbed at her lipstick. Was there something wrong with her face? She looked fine to Naruto, but then again, he wasn't exactly experienced in the art of makeup. Well, besides his kabuki paint, but he doubted that it counted. "Do you know why you're here?" Aphrodite addressed Percy. I don't know, Percy responded. Because Ares would have tried to decapitate me otherwise. Aphrodite hummed. Perhaps my question was too vague. Why are you here on this quest? Artemis has been captured. Aphrodite rolled her eyes. Oh, Artemis. Please. I mean, if they were going to kidnap a goddess, she should be breathtakingly beautiful, don't you think? I pity the poor dears who have to imprison Artemis. She is truly a dreadful sight to look at. Naruto had multiple objections to that. But I digress. I know that's why the others are on the quest, they wish to save Artemis and defeat the monster she was hunting. I'm more interested in you. Annabeth is in danger, Percy automatically answered, as if some compulsion had overtaken him and forced him to reply. Aphrodite beamed. Exactly. A quest for true love. Oh, it's perfect. Percy blushed. It's not, I'm not. Aphrodite waved her hand. Don't deny it, Percy. You know how close Annabeth was to joining the hunters. Her eyes flashed angrily at that. I mean, it appeared Percy had forgotten how to speak. He slowly lowered the mirror. Aphrodite sighed. Come on, Percy. I'm on your side here. I'm the reason you're here, after all. Percy blinked. What? The t-shirt laced with centaur blood the Stahl brothers gave Phoebe, Aphrodite smiled. Did you think they came up with that themselves? Of course, that plan failed due to young Naruto over here. The hunters also thwarted several other of my attempts, the poisoned food, the exploding bow. Fortunately, the murmukis I stirred up in the end convinced Phoebe to give up. Wait. Hold up. What? That was you? Naruto demanded. She nodded with no shame. Of course. Why, who did you think it was? Cronus. The Titans. Naruto didn't say any of that out loud, of course. He could only stare at her incredulously. She tried to seriously hurt the hunters so Percy could go on the quest? Because, really. These hunters are just so boring. Going on to a quest to save Artemis, let her stay lost, I say. But a quest for true love. Aphrodite sighed dreamily. It's perfect. Annabeth was about to throw her life away and join the hunters. And you, Percy Jackson, can save her from that. It's so romantic. Did she just say that? Romantic? Wait, what are you? Now see here, Percy, Aphrodite leaned forward. The hunters are your enemies. Forget them and Artemis and the monster. They're not important. Instead, concentrate on finding and saving Annabeth. She did not just say that. Something cracked. It was Naruto's patience. Artemis is not important. Naruto's voice shook with barely restrained anger. Aphrodite turned to him, surprised. Oh? I remember you. You were the kid with that new power. Chi, was it? Chakra. Whatever, Aphrodite dismissed. You're still young, you don't understand love yet. Love conquers all. Fighting for a useless goddess and some dusty old monster, boring. But fighting for love. She smiled at Percy. That's something worth fighting for, perhaps even dying for. Yeah, I'd like to keep the dying at the minimum. Percy glanced at Naruto worriedly, as if he was afraid that Naruto was going to say something that would get them both vaporized. Anyway, it's been nice talking to you and all, but I think we should go. So eager to go save Annabeth, Aphrodite mused. It's too cute. We haven't had a good tragic love story in a long time, I look forward to seeing how yours unfolds. Hold up, tragic. You realize, Lady Aphrodite, Naruto interrupted, that Artemis is vital for the fight against the Titans, correct? And that the monster she was hunting would bring the downfall of Olympus. Aphrodite sighed impatiently. Please. Are you really worried about the Titans? I mean, what are they going to do? And besides, the hunters are already taking care of that. No, what truly matters is that Percy gets reunited with Annabeth and prevents her from becoming a hunter. Wow. Naruto knew that many of the gods didn't care about the Titans, but wow. It's one thing to hear about it, it's another thing to actually see it in action. He was starting to fully understand why the council meeting would be doomed without Artemis. Yeah, I'm pretty worried about the Titans, Percy piped up. You know, since they're trying to cause the destruction of Western civilization. And kill me. Emphasis on the kill me part. Oh, don't be dramatic, Aphrodite waved her hand dismissively. At any rate, follow your heart. My heart doesn't exactly have a GPS, Percy said dryly. How am I supposed to know where it's going? Aphrodite smiled sympathetically. Not knowing is half the fun. Exquisitely painful, isn't it? Not being sure who you love and who loves you? Oh, you kids. It's too cute. But don't worry, Percy. I'm not going to let this be easy and boring for you. No, I have some wonderful surprises in store. Anguish? Indecision? Oh, you just wait. Percy's expression darkened. What? Now, you'd better go, Aphrodite waved her hand and the mirror on Percy's lap disappeared. And do be careful in my husband's territory. Don't take anything. He's awfully fussy about his trinkets and broken projects, even if they are just trash. What did you mean by anguish? Percy demanded. Are you going to screw up my love life? Aphrodite's hand flew to her mouth, shocked. Of course not. I'm only trying to help you, Percy. There are dark times ahead for you, but as long as you stay strong and follow your heart, you will eventually see the light. And before Percy could respond, the car door opened and Ares grabbed him and tossed him unceremoniously out of the car. Percy landed on his feet with a glare. Hey, what's the big idea? Ares shut the door behind them, leaving Naruto alone with Aphrodite. Outside, Naruto could hear Percy and Ares begin throwing insults at each other. So, I should get going as well, Naruto reached for the door. He didn't want to even be near Aphrodite. Naruto, what are you hiding? Naruto froze before quickly plastering on a confused smile. What? Aphrodite leaned forward and Naruto drew in a sharp breath. Her appearance changed again. Red hair. Violet eyes. Beautiful. Naruto, I'm the goddess of beauty, Aphrodite smiled. Her voice broke the illusion. She may look like Kushina, but she wasn't. I know when someone is concealing their appearance. Wait. Oh no. What do you mean? Naruto frowned. Inwardly, he was panicking. She detected his henge. Damn it. He had underestimated her. Aphrodite sighed impatiently. Don't lie to me, Naruto. Appearances are within my domain, and so trust me when I say that you are not who you appear you are. She reached out her hand and touched Naruto's face gently. So tell me. What are you hiding? Naruto tensed up as he sensed something foreign being emitted from Aphrodite. Divine power. A moment later, he felt his chakra cracking and the henge dispelling. His eyes widened in shock as he tried to hastily reapply the henge, but it didn't work, the henge refused to form. She blocked his chakra? How? What the hell? No. It wasn't that. His chakra was working, she was simply altering reality itself, appearances were her domain and as such she had absolute control over all its aspects. It would be the same as trying to use a water jutsu against Poseidon, he had absolute control and as such the water would simply refuse to respond to the chakra. Gods could literally alter the reality of their domains on a whim. It was like having admin level commands in a game where you could literally set change appearance equals false. What? Aphrodite whispered, looking at his face. What in the name of Ouranos? Did it not work? She shook her head. No, I sense no other illusions on you. Which means this is your true form. But how? Naruto laughed nervously. Well, this is awkward. My mother is Leto. Which is why I have a resemblance to Artemis. We're half-siblings. Gods, he hoped it worked. Don't lie, Aphrodite murmured, still half frozen in shock. Leto would have told me. Besides, she's been on Delos for the past several centuries, and I know for a fact she hasn't gotten together with any mortal. You're Artemis's child, aren't you? This explains your strange attachment to her, as well as why the satyr said you had her scent. Then her face twisted into a hateful snarl. I see. So Artemis had a child, huh? Just when I thought she couldn't go any lower. Don't speak about her like that, Naruto snapped. His secret was out. There was no point in being polite and going under the radar anymore. You disgust me, you know that. Aphrodite's mouth dropped open. Excuse me. You're the goddess of love, Naruto narrowed his eyes. But instead of helping others find true love, all you do is find sick entertainment in the suffering of others. A tragic love story? Anguish and indecision? What right do you have to mess with Percy's life like that? You're not playing a video game, you're playing with a person's life here. Aphrodite stared at him, as if having trouble believing that he was speaking to her like that. Outside, the sound of Percy and Ares's argument abruptly cut to a stunned silence. Then, in perfect synchronization, Naruto heard them step slowly away from the car, as if getting out of the splatter zone of an imminent explosion. You dare! Aphrodite hissed, and finally at long last, Kushina's face melted away and was replaced by the face of Haku. Naruto blanched in horror. He wasn't attracted to Haku. Haku was a guy. Naruto wasn't gay. Sure, Haku was prettier than most of the girls Naruto had seen, but still. What the hell? Unless. Ah, that must be it. Haku must have lied to Naruto and she truly was a girl. Naruto nodded once resolutely. Haku was a girl. Aphrodite must have interpreted Naruto's look of horror as him finally realizing what he was saying to her, a goddess. Ah, so you finally understand. But no amount of apologies will make me forgive you. Naruto, the male child of Artemis. No wonder you were kept hidden by Apollo. She looked at him with a newfound hatred. I wonder. Yes, that will do. Oh, that is perfect. Naruto glanced at her warily, but Aphrodite simply smiled viciously. Goodbye, Naruto. Have fun with the hunters. What do you mean? Naruto demanded. Let's just say. You're going to have some difficulty reapplying your clever little illusion. Aphrodite laughed cruelly. Oh, I wonder how the hunters will react to that. To know that their precious mistress broke the oath and had a male child? I wonder how long it will be until their love for their mistress turns to hatred. She leaned in close and whispered, as if she was sharing a secret, love and hate are awfully similar to each other, you see. It wouldn't be too difficult to twist their love for their mistress into a seething hatred. Naruto's hands clenched into fists. She was just asking to get punched in the face. Artemis's reaction to that would be beautiful, Aphrodite smiled. Of course, her pain would be nothing compared to the pain of all the girls out there who she robbed of love, but even a tiny fraction of that would be enough. It's been centuries since I had done anything of this level to Artemis. Thank you, Naruto, for the opportunity. Don't you dare do a single thing to the hunters of Artemis. Naruto's chakra thrummed agitatedly beneath his skin. Why would you even do this? Aphrodite shrugged. Terrible acts have been committed in the name of love. Just look at Helen and Paris. Then she smirked. Oh, and I should mention. After I have successfully influenced the minds of the hunters, don't look at me like that, they're the victims here, I'll begin a little vote to, how do I put this, blast you out of existence. It's nothing personal. You are an abomination, and I'm rather interested to see how Artemis would react to her child being killed in front of her. Do you think she'll cry? Personally, I don't think so. She's much too cold-hearted for that. Naruto was silent for a moment. I thought the goddess of love would be kind, caring, and compassionate. But clearly, I was wrong. You know, after spending so much time with Apollo, Artemis, and Hestia, I had forgotten just how horrible you gods are. Aphrodite chuckled. You think Artemis and Apollo haven't done infinitely more horrible things? Don't make me laugh. Then, before Naruto could respond, she snapped her fingers. The door opened and he was forcibly thrown out of the car by an invisible force, landing hard on his feet. Have a nice night, Naruto. Naruto spoke slowly and clearly so there would be no possible way she'd mishear what he said. I finally understand why my mother despises you. His eyes flashed. It's because you're a first-rate bitch. Then he shut the door behind him, not even bothering to see Aphrodite's reaction. The limousine immediately disappeared in a flash of pink light. Naruto turned to face Percy and Ares, who were staring at him with a mixture of incredulity, disbelief, and horror. Holy, Percy began in a fearful yet almost odd voice. Shit, Ares finished, a hint of respect appearing in his eyes. For just a moment, there existed no animosity between the two, only a strange camaraderie, as if they had just bonded over the absolute insanity that just occurred. How are you still alive? Percy breathed. I have never seen someone speak to her like that without her causing them to fall in love with an inanimate object, Ares agreed. Naruto's face darkened. She can cause more pain to Artemis if she keeps me alive. Oh yeah. You're Artemis's kid, huh? Ares rubbed his chin, examining Naruto. I gotta say, it's almost scary how much you resemble her. How did that happen? Naruto shrugged wordlessly. He didn't want to elaborate on the details of his birth. Primarily because he didn't understand the details of his birth all that much. She didn't break her oath, if that's what you're asking. The details are complicated. Ares nodded in understanding. Ah, so you're like one of Athena's kids. Well, nothing personal, but since my lady friend hates you, I gotta hate you as well. He sighed. It's a shame too, you had the potential to become a great warrior. Naruto smirked. Who said I wasn't already one? His eyebrows rose. Oh? Wanna fight? Naruto hesitated before shaking his head. Apologies, Lord Ares, but we're still on a quest. Perhaps afterwards. Ares grinned. I'll remember that. Wait, hold on, if Artemis didn't break her oath, then how were you born? Percy asked confusedly. And what do you mean by Athena's kids? Naruto and Ares paused. Naruto began, you do know that gods don't necessarily need to, have their happy time to make children, right? Ares continued. At Percy's blank look, he rolled his eyes. Damn, how can you be this stupid? You know that Athena is a maiden goddess. At this, Percy's eyes widened. She is. Naruto nodded. Yup. She combines her thoughts with immortals, essentially creating a brainchild. What? Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. You mean Annabeth is a brainchild? Percy stared at Naruto. And you're the same. More or less. Naruto replied before looking over at the taco shop. He hesitated. Hey Percy, can you do me a favor? Don't tell the hunters anything. Please. Percy nodded. Got it. I couldn't hear anything, but I did hear that if the hunters found out about you, Aphrodite would do some pretty bad things. And I wouldn't want that. Oh, and can you also keep what she said to me a secret too? Yeah, of course. Kid, hate to break it to you, but Aphrodite already placed a spell on you, Ares cut in. You can't alter your appearance. Unless you somehow get Eros to come help you, but I doubt that would happen. A spell on me, Naruto thought it over. Perhaps. He brought his hands together in a hand seal again and concentrated. A moment later, silver chakra exploded out of him as he gathered as much as he possibly could. Naruto's eyes flickered for a moment. Silver? Whoa. Percy stepped back in shock, but Naruto paid him no heed. He was wasting a lot of chakra here. Extremely inefficient. It would be as if he summoned a tsunami to fill a single glass of water. But then again, in this analogy, there's something blocking the glass of water, and Naruto has to try to break through it. A little more. His tenketsu burned as the pressure built up within himself. 2 times, no, 3 times the amount of chakra Kakashi-sensei had. Now. Henge no jutsu. Ares' eyes widened behind his shades as pink light shattered around Naruto like broken glass before Naruto became a blonde-haired blue-eyed boy once more. What in Tartarus? He muttered as he took off his shades to get a better look, exposing mini explosions where his eyes should be. And then it was over. The silver light died down as the chakra dissipated into the air. Naruto stood there, having casually broken Aphrodite's spell. What the fuck was that? Ares demanded. Percy looked over, appalled. Dude, he's like 10 years old. Language. Shut the fuck up. What he just did was impossible. Aphrodite has absolute control over her domain. What the fuck? Ares had a look of utter confusion and disbelief on his face. Not even the gods can break her spells. It worked. Naruto grinned in exhilaration. For once, his strategy of adding more chakra worked out. Kid, I'm serious. How did you just do that? Naruto shrugged. My chakra's awesome, of course. If a god's powers were like having admin-level commands, then Naruto's chakra was a hack altogether. Ares shook his head in bewilderment. Right. Okay then. He glanced up at the sky. You realize that the other gods probably saw this, right? And they know your secret. Naruto grimaced. Yeah. I do. Ares nodded. Expect a meeting with Athena soon. She'll have a lot of questions for you. Oh, and kid? For what it's worth, good luck. Naruto smiled. Thank you, Lord Ares. Ares snapped his fingers and the world spun around them in a cloud of red dust. Naruto was knocked briefly off balance as Percy just flat out fell to the ground. When the world stopped spinning, the road, the taco restaurant, everything was gone. Zoe, Bianca, Thalia, Percy, and Naruto were standing in the middle of the junkyard, mountains of scrap metal stretched out in every direction. Aphrodite, Zoe hissed after Naruto and Percy filled them in on what happened, minus a few details. I hate that goddess. Are you two alright? Percy and Naruto exchanged a glance. We're fine. No problem. She didn't threaten Naruto or anything. Nor did she promise to make Percy's love life hell. They both nodded in sync. Nothing happened. Really? Thalia asked doubtfully. Yup. For sure. So. Percy said, anxious to change the subject. How do we get out of here? That way, Zoe said. That is west. How can you tell? Zoe rolled her eyes. Ursa Major is in the north, which means that must be west. She pointed west, then at the northern constellation. Oh yeah, Percy nodded. The bear thing. Zoe narrowed her eyes. Show some respect. It was a fine bear. A worthy opponent. Naruto nodded in agreement. Indeed. Artemis had told him about the story of Callisto before. Zoe shot Naruto a surprised glance but didn't comment on it. At any rate, if what you say about this being her husband's junkyard is true, then we should leave. Thalia nodded. This is the junkyards of the gods. Don't touch anything. They slowly made their way, staring at the piles of junk around them in awe. Gold, silver, refrigerators, car parts, swords, bows. Look. Bianca picked up a bow that glowed silver in moonlight. A hunter's bow. Thalia glared at Zoe. What? Zoe said defensively. She's new, she hasn't even gone through how to not anger the gods 101 yet. Bianca, when we say to don't touch anything, we mean it. The gods are extremely protective of their stuff. Drop it. Bianca deflated. Alright, whoa. The bow began to shrink and became a hair clip shaped like a crescent moon. It's just like Percy's sword. Bianca, Zoe said grimly. On top of the gods being protective of their stuff, all these items are in this junkyard for a reason. They are defective. Or cursed. Bianca reluctantly set down the hair clip. Shall we run? Naruto suggested. They were wasting time right now. Zoe nodded. Just don't trip. They began sprinting west. Naruto and Zoe led the way, easily navigating past all the junk. Percy and Bianca were right behind them and Thalia was in the rear, on the lookout for enemies with her spear. Finally, they saw the edge of the junkyard about half a mile ahead of them, the lights of a highway stretching through the desert. However, what is that? Bianca gasped. Ahead of them was a hill larger than the others, the length of a training field and as tall as the two-story building. It was made completely out of metal, and at one end was 10 thick metal columns, wedged tightly together. They look like toes. Really large toes. Zoe and Thalia exchanged nervous glances. Let's go around, Thalia said. Far around. Why? Percy asked, frowning. The road is right there. He paused as he realized the full implications of there being huge metal toes on the ground. Oh. Never mind. After several minutes of walking, they finally stepped onto the highway. We made it out, Zoe breathed a small sigh of relief. Thank the gods. A little too soon. Behind them, Naruto heard a sound that he could only describe as 1,000 Azurapath panes getting blown into tiny metal pieces. He whirled around only to see a giant bronze giant in full Greek battle armor. Those were toes of a giant metal giant. It stood taller than the Hokage mountain. A machine that big? How? Talos. Zoe's bow was out in a flash. But no. It can't be the original. It's too small. Too small. It must be a prototype, Thalia guessed. A defective model. The metal giant moved, drawing a rusty and dull sword easily 100 feet long. It raised the sword high above its head, its joints creaking. Then it slammed its sword down on top of the demigods. They scattered immediately. Naruto frowned as he backflipped in the air and landed on top of a truck with a broken windshield. They were wasting time right now. Zoe! He yelled. Do you have any explosive arrows? No. She yelled back as she fired a volley of arrows that shattered harmlessly against the giant's face. The giant attacked Thalia, interspersing his strikes with stomps on the ground that sent debris rocketing everywhere at great speeds. Naruto reached into his kunai pouch and withdrew several arrows, although they weren't normal arrows. Instead of a metal arrowhead, there was instead a crystal filled with a green liquid. A Greek fire arrow. Here. He threw them to her like he would throw kunai. Zoe caught them out of the air effortlessly, looking at them in surprise. Greek fire arrows. She smirked. I see growing up with Apollo has its benefits. You take care of the giant. I'll go check if Percy and Bianca are okay. There might be other defenses set up here. Naruto closed his eyes and extended senses. There. He quickly made his way over to behind a broken chariot, where Percy and Bianca were crouched, having a tense discussion. It was for Nico, Bianca was saying, tears in her eyes. There was a small metal figurine in her hand. Mythomagic. It was the only figurine he didn't have. Throw it down, Percy suggested. Maybe the giant will leave us alone. She did, but it didn't seem to do anything. She clenched her fists. It's my fault that the giant is attacking. I'll make it right. I'll hold it off while you guys get away. Percy's eyes grew wide. Bianca, no. You're still new to being a demigod. You're not allowed to have self-sacrificing tendencies yet. She shook her head. No. It's fine. I need to take responsibility. Hey Bianca. Naruto spoke up. They whirled around, obviously not having heard him approach. I appreciate your dedication and all, but we already got it covered. He smiled. Besides, I promised Nico that I'll keep you safe, and there is no way I'll let you go sacrifice yourself like that. But it's my fault, Bianca protested. I can't let you guys die. Wait, what do you mean by you already got it covered? There was a sound of a deafening explosion behind him before the metal giant collapsed to the ground with a horrible ear-piercing screeching sound. Naruto smiled at their stunned faces. What, did you really think a single defective metal giant can beat the lieutenant of the Hunters of Artemis and a child of the Big Three? Bianca only stared back at him dumbly, tears still in her eyes. What the fuck? I second that. I third that. I swear, didn't we just cut her thread? We did. How is this even possible? I have no idea. We may actually have a problem here. Wait. Am I seeing things? What are you, Is the thread disappearing? How? I don't know. Naruto, everything okay there? Zoe called. Yeah, they're fine. I think the giant was the only defense, Naruto called back before turning back to them. Anyway, let's go. I don't want to stay in this junkyard for longer than necessary. How did you defeat it? Percy asked curiously as they walked back to the highway. Zoe inclined her head at Naruto. He had some Greek fire arrows. Extremely rare and expensive. Very destructive as well. Percy whistled when he finally got a clear look at the giant's face. It was just gone, only a concavity remained. Why did it attack us? Thalia asked, wiping some sweat off her forehead. Bianca looked away guiltily. I may have taken something. After everything we said? Thalia asked disbelievingly. Sorry, Bianca whispered. But I just felt really bad for leaving Nico. And I wanted to get him something. And she looked so sad and remorseful, Zoe and Thalia couldn't even stay mad at her. Just don't do it again, Zoe said gently. I know our commands must seem strange and illogical sometimes, but you just have to trust us on them. Bianca nodded. I will. I'm sorry. Hey, on a completely unrelated note, how are we supposed to get out of here? Percy asked, looking around them. They were on a deserted highway, not a car in sight. I believe I may be of help, a voice spoke up from behind them. Naruto spun around, a kunai in hand. It was a woman with stormy gray eyes and long dark hair pulled back into a ponytail. She was dressed normally, blue jeans, a denim shirt, but she definitely not anyone ordinary. Naruto hadn't sensed her at all, one moment there was nothing behind him, the next she was there. Either she was a master manipulator of the mist, or she was a goddess. Judging by Thalia and Zoe's sharp intakes of breath, it was probably the latter. Lady Athena, Zoe greeted respectfully. She inclined her head. Zoe Nightshade. It's good to see you well. With all due respect, what are you doing here? Thalia inquired. Athena smiled. I'm here to ask Naruto some questions. Zoe frowned. Naruto? Why? Athena opened her mouth to speak but Naruto beat her to it. Lady Athena is probably interested about my chakra, you know? I mean, it's new, and I don't think anyone else in this world has chakra. Athena blinked. Well, yes. That is one reason why I came. The other is that. Athena, do you know where Annabeth is? Percy interrupted. Naruto shot him a grateful glance. Athena's expression darkened. I have vague suspicions, but nothing concrete. If we wish to save Artemis and Annabeth, then we should hurry, Naruto took over. We shouldn't waste time. Athena turned to him with a somewhat amused look. Very well. But before all that, you must rest first. A tired hero is a dead hero. She snapped her fingers. The world around them cracked before they suddenly found themselves in a rather luxurious hotel room. Why don't you guys get settled? I'll go talk to Naruto on the balcony. Athena stared at Naruto with a clinical gaze. A male child of Artemis, she mused. I confess, even I didn't see this coming. Naruto laughed nervously. Yeah. Before you ask, no, she did not break her oath. It was essence combination. I see. That's a relief, I suppose. Athena leaned in close to Naruto and inhaled deeply. Naruto jumped back in shock. Lady Athena. Just making sure, she murmured, materializing a notepad and a pen and scribbling down some notes. Naruto, take off your shirt. Naruto blanched. What? Why? I need to check your physiology. She gestured at him impatiently. Hurry up, now. My physiology is human. Naruto held up his hands defensively. Apollo already ran extensive medical scans. Understood. I'll have to ask him for those records later, Athena made another small note. How did you break Aphrodite's spell? You're not a god, I presume. Naruto shook his head. Definitely not. And I have no idea how I broke the spell. I just pumped in a lot of chakra and it somehow worked out. Interesting. Does your chakra have anti-divine properties? Huh? I don't think so. I mean, when I used my Rasengan, which is basically just condensed chakra, it only gave Apollo some light scratches. He did reinforce his stomach with a bit of healing magic though, but that shouldn't have affected it a lot. Athena nodded, deep in thought. Are you half mortal? Naruto blinked before shaking his head. No. I'm not. Although Apollo isn't sure exactly what I am. How old are you? 3 years old. Athena didn't look surprised. Do you feel pain randomly? Naruto frowned. No. Really? Athena made another note. Have you ever experienced a tearing sensation deep within you? As if your core is being ripped apart. No. And so the questions continued, all seemingly random and innocuous, but Naruto couldn't help but get the feeling that Athena was slowly learning everything there was to know about him, even stuff he himself didn't know about. Naruto answered truthfully when he could and lied when there was no other option. He briefly considered lying about everything but then quickly dropped the idea. There was no point, really. It's not as if he was telling her anything really important and he didn't want to be caught up in a lie later on. The goddess of wisdom and battle was not someone he wanted as an enemy. Finally, she flicked her hand and the notepad and pen disappeared. Naruto, what are your intentions towards Olympus? Huh? Her gray eyes seemed to pierce straight into Naruto. Will you ever join up with the Titans? Never. Naruto replied vehemently. I would never betray my friends and family. She nodded. I see. One last question. If it came to a choice between saving Annabeth and saving Artemis, which would you choose? Naruto paused. Why? Humor me. If you could only save one, then who would it be? Naruto was silent for a moment. Artemis, he finally said. I'd save Artemis. But I'd still do everything in my power to save Annabeth as well. For the first time since she began asking questions, Athena smiled as if he had answered correctly. I see. That is good. You prioritize saving the essential targets. Naruto's blood ran cold. Essential? Athena nodded. As much as it pains me to say it, the loss of Artemis would be much more impactful than the loss of my daughter. On this quest, the only people I trust to always save Artemis is you and Zoe Nightshade. Bianca is new so she may try to save Annabeth out of a misplaced kindness, Thalia is her best friend, and the son of Poseidon is in love with my daughter. You're Annabeth's mother, Naruto narrowed his eyes. Shouldn't you be trying to convince me to prioritize her? Athena sighed. She is a mortal, and mortals die. That is the truth. Losing Artemis would be more detrimental in the long run. She noticed Naruto's angry look. Do not think me to be cruel, Naruto. If my daughter dies, then I will grieve like any mother would. But if Artemis is lost, then the Titans' odds of defeating us increases exponentially. And if the Titans win, then infinitely more lives will be lost. Naruto couldn't argue against that logic. It was what any leader should do, after all. Kill one person to save 100. Kill 100 to save 1,000. Kill 1,000 to save 1,000,000. That's what a Hokage would do. But that doesn't mean Naruto liked it. And so, I'm telling you right now, Naruto, do not hesitate to abandon my daughter to save Artemis. No matter what, and for just a second, Naruto could swear he saw a hint of sadness in Athena's eyes, but it was gone as quick as it appeared. Olympus cannot afford to lose Artemis. Naruto clenched his fists. Very well. However, there is one thing you're wrong about. Athena frowned. And that is, you assume that we will be in a situation where we can only save one. But that will never happen. After all, I'm strong, Naruto smiled. Don't worry, Lady Athena. I'll save both Mother and Annabeth. Athena gazed at him with her stormy gray eyes, as if analyzing his very soul. I hope you do, she finally said. Then she blinked. Hold on, Mother? Artemis lets you call her Mother. I mean, I normally call her Mom, Naruto tilted his head. Why? Athena's lips quirked up into a small smile. Nothing. When you get to San Francisco, I have 2 pieces of advice. First, stay away from the tunnels. Second, your clones cannot bear the weight of the sky. Naruto frowned. What? But Athena was already gone. What did she want with you? Bianca asked curiously. Naruto shrugged. She asked me a bunch of questions about my chakra. He glanced at the clock on the wall. He had talked to Athena for about an hour. Shall we leave? Zoe nodded, grabbing her gear. Let's go. Wait, now. Percy protested. It's like 2 in the morning. Zoe raised her eyebrows. And? You heard what Athena said, a tired hero is a dead hero. Sleep is for weaklings. Thalia made her way to the door. Come on. We had an entire hour to rest and eat. We saved some for you. Bianca handed Naruto a small takeout box. He opened it to see a cheeseburger inside. Athena already paid for room service, she explained. We weren't sure what you'd like, so we just went with the safest option. Naruto nodded in thanks, taking a bite. Salty. Not that bad. They exited the hotel. The staff didn't seem to see them, clearly, some mist residue remained. Something else saw them though. Skeleton warriors, Naruto groaned. What? There's no way. Zoe caught sight of them and sighed heavily. Naruto, you mind holding them off? Sure. 20 shadow clones later, they were walking the opposite direction, the sound of fighting behind them. How should we get to San Francisco? Bianca glanced behind them nervously. Naruto had no idea why. It's not as if the skeleton warriors could defeat his shadow clones. I can always hotwire a car, Thalia suggested. Zoe nodded. We have no other options. A scream pierced through the air. They whirled around. The scream had come from back where the skeletons were fighting. A mortal. Bianca said in alarm. We need to check to see if they're okay, Percy announced grimly. Come on. They didn't argue. As they returned to the scene, they saw the skeletons on the ground. In pieces. Trying to regenerate. A few clones absently used the Rasengan whenever they got close to regenerating. Several clones were fighting amongst themselves, Naruto face-palmed. Of course. And there was one clone talking to a red-haired girl. How are there 20 of you? She waved her hand wildly, her eyes filled with fear. And are those skeletons on the ground? Zoe tensed up. She can see through the mist? A clear-sighted mortal. Percy frowned. What? There are certain mortals who the mist simply does not affect, Thalia explained. She's probably one of them. That, or she's a demigod. She turned her head and saw them approach. Her eyes widened further. There's another one of you. Yo. Naruto called. I'll take it from here. The clone turned around and relief shone in its eyes. Thanks, boss. Then it dispelled, causing the girl to gasp in shock. What are you? She whispered, backing up slowly. The name's Naruto, Naruto grinned. It's nice to meet you. I'm Rachel Elizabeth Dare, she responded automatically. It's nice to meet you as well. Then she frowned. What are you? Thalia stepped forward. Before that, you mind trying cutting yourself with this? She offered Rachel her spear. Rachel took another step back. Are you crazy? Just trust me, Thalia said. Rachel bit her lip but grabbed the spear nonetheless, cautiously holding it up to her hand and gently pressing down the tip, and gasped when the spear passed harmlessly through her hand. What the hell? Clear-sighted mortal, Zoe announced. She sighed. Rachel Elizabeth Dare, it would be best if you forgot what you saw today. Forget what Rachel gaped at her. You want me to forget about 20 clones beating up skeletons with blue balls of death? Percy snickered. Thalia slapped him on the back of the head, shooting him a ferocious glare. A solid holographic spear, as paradoxical as that sounds, and how you guys called me immortal as if you're not. We don't have time for this, Thalia muttered. I'll go hotwire a car. Rachel looked at her in outrage. You're going to go what now? Nothing. Rachel bit her lip, thinking hard. If you guys explain, then I can give you a car. They all paused. You can give us a car? Zoe asked cautiously. How, exactly? I'm on vacation right now, Rachel crossed her arms. We have a rental, and it wouldn't cost us too much if somebody stole it. They exchanged glances. Fine, Zoe accepted. The Greek gods are real, and so are the monsters. There is normally an illusion that prevents regular mortals from seeing the supernatural, which we call the mist, but occasionally, there'll be a mortal who can see through the mist, who we call a clear-sighted mortal. That is what you are. Rachel stared at her. If you were going to lie, at least make it sound more believable, she muttered. Whatever. Apparently, I'm not going to get answers out of you guys. She nodded over to a car parked off in the distance. Go, take it. I'd rather you steal our rental than some innocent dude's car. Naruto blinked. She thought they were lying? He did suppose it sounded rather outlandish. Zoe and Thalia didn't bother correcting her, instead walking towards the car. Percy cast one last glance at the girl before heading for the car as well. Bianca hesitated. For what it's worth, thank you, Rachel. You have no idea how important this is. Rachel nodded. I can imagine. When I went outside to get some fresh air, I did not expect all of this. She gestured at the clones preventing the skeletons from reforming. Well, you should get going now. Bianca nodded and then headed for the car as well, leaving only Naruto and Rachel. Don't you need to go as well? Rachel asked curiously. Naruto hesitated before handing her a golden drachma. Now that you're aware of the truth, you may be in more danger than before. If a monster ever tries to attack you, just throw the drachma into a rainbow and say, "Oh Iris, goddess of the rainbow, please accept my offering." Then ask for me. Is this real gold? Rachel stared at the drachma incredulously. You have real gold that you casually throw into a rainbow, but you're too cheap to buy a rental. We're kind of pressed for time right now, Naruto admitted. I need to go. See ya. She sighed. Bye. Once again, Zoe drove. This time, Thalia didn't even have that many objections, only grumbling out a small, "I look older than you." The car was surprisingly luxurious, with soft leather seats and a walnut wood dash. Percy and Bianca passed out almost immediately, clearly tired from the events of the day. Thalia sat in the shotgun seat, absently staring out the window, and Zoe looked as good as new. Naruto, for his part, wasn't tired at all. His stamina seemed to have grown ever since he was reborn. However, demigod dreams. His last dream had been pretty useless. Hopefully, this one would provide a bit more information. And so he closed his eyes, allowing sleep to claim him. Naruto stared around at his surroundings. He was in a meeting room. The walls were painted black, no. The walls were made up of solid black crystal. Floating balls of light lined the wall, providing adequate lighting for Naruto to see everyone in the room. There were 4 people all seated around a table. On one side, there was a man dressed formally in a black suit. He had multiple deep scars on his face, as if something had gouged out chunks in the past. On the other side, there was a woman dressed in silver. She looked pale and sickly. Another woman with green eyes and blonde hair wearing torch earrings. And a satyr that had several life support machines hooked up to him. Judging by how they were all emitting vast amounts of power, they were all gods, possibly even titans. Naruto mentally named them Silver, Suit, Torch, and Satyr. Good morning, everyone, Suit smiled at them kindly. How are you all doing? Get on with it, Torch said disinterestedly. Suit politely inclined his head. Very well. As I had said in the invitation, I am here to offer you all what you want. Satyr bleated in excitement. Mass genocide on humans. Suit hesitated. Not quite. I'm sure you are all aware of the fact that Artemis has been captured. Silver raised her eyebrows. Of course we are. I hope we didn't come all the way here just for you to tell us what we already knew. Suit nodded. I would never do that. Tell me. What do you 3 know about domains? Specifically, the transfer of domains. Silver laughed. Is this a joke? You're asking me about the transfer of domains. Ah, of course, my lady. I didn't mean it as an insult, Suit smiled apologetically. As we all know, a divine being can lose their domain of power if another more powerful god takes over. Like what Apollo did to Helios, Torch spoke up. Or what Artemis did to Iliotheia and Selene. Or what Athena did to Metis. Silver winced as Torch spoke. Precisely, Suit nodded. I admit, even I do not know the entire specifics, however what I do know is that I, along with the Titan Lord and Koyos, have discovered a method to forcibly transfer a god's domain. The three plus Naruto all tensed up. Forcibly transfer a god's domain. How? Satyr demanded. Suit chuckled. As we all know, when a god dies, they get sent to Tartarus. However, a lesser-known fact is that for just a moment, their hold to their domains weakens. After all, as they enter the pit, Tartarus unconsciously attempts to absorb the god's essence. Torch's eyes widened. What? Suit nodded. Of course, Tartarus stops himself immediately. Absorbing essence comes with more trouble than it's worth. However, for just a split second, as Tartarus attempts to absorb the god's essence and by extension their domains, the god's connection to their domains is weakened. Of course, this is negligible, the time frame is so short, it can be described as instantaneous and nobody can take advantage of the opening. Satyr scoffed. Oh, so we came all the way out here for nothing. His life support machines beeped threateningly. Suit smiled. You forget one simple fact. Why worry about having too little time to act? When we have all the time in the world. There was a moment of silence as the statement sunk in. Cronus, Torch breathed. The temperature in the room dropped by several degrees and the lights dimmed slightly at the name. Indeed, and Suit's polite smile became downright predatory. The Titan Lord is capable of slowing time down to near a stop. If he does it when the god's connection to their domain is weakened, then it would be difficult but not impossible to sever the god from their domain. Silver narrowed her eyes. How? Suit chuckled. I'm afraid the specifics are a secret, but rest assured, it would work. Koyos, the Titan of Pharzite, has guaranteed it. Artemis has many domains. Torch mused. And you say we can take all of them? Suit shook his head. No. Only 3 domains. However, we can choose. He smiled craftily. And with you 3, I can imagine which ones you desire. Moon, he pointed at Silver. Wilderness, he pointed at Satyr. And finally, forests, he pointed at Torch. A gleam appeared in Satyr's eyes. Oh? In return for giving us these domains, what do you want from us? Suit chuckled. All I want is for you to pledge loyalty to the Titan Lord, of course. When he rises again, join and assist him. Silver frowned. Don't you mean if he rises? Suit shook his head. The Titan Lord's resurrection is assured. As the Titan of Forethought, I can tell you that with an absolute certainty. He will rise again, and when he does, Olympus will be razed to the ground. What about the sky? Torch inquired. If you kill Artemis, then who will hold the sky? Suit laughed. So many questions. We shall find a temporary placeholder until all 4 Titan generals are resurrected and their might and presence alone prevents the sky from touching the earth. His eyes twinkled. Or rather, many temporary placeholders. Satyr nodded slowly. Yeah, I'll join. It's not as if I have anything better to do, he chuckled bitterly, gesturing at his life support machines. Torch nodded. While I personally do not care that much for the forests, I shall always accept increases to my power. She clenched her fists. And if it means the major Olympians suffer from it, then all the better. Silver hesitated before a dark look appeared in her eyes. I accept as well. Brilliant, Suit smiled, clapping his hands together. Then we are in an accord. We shall dispatch Artemis on the winter solstice, the day where our power is the strongest, and transfer her domains to you 3. And don't be late, he smiled cheerfully. And that was when Percy shook Naruto awake. Naruto's eyes snapped open. Artemis, he breathed. Percy frowned. Yes. That is who we're rescuing. No, that's not what I mean, Naruto shook his head. The situation is worse than we thought. He quickly filled them in on the details of his dream. Zoe's face grew more and more stony as he spoke. I see, she said when he finished. That is not good. We'll have to hurry. Is it possible? Thalia asked. I mean, I've never heard of a god having their domains forcibly taken away from them before. Zoe hesitated. Normally, I would say that it's impossible. However, if both Koyos, the titan of intellect, knowledge, and forethought, and Prometheus, the titan of forethought, agrees that it would work, then we cannot risk it. Her eyes flashed. Furthermore, we cannot allow Artemis to be sent to Tartarus. Naruto nodded. Let's hurry. Are we in San Francisco yet? Zoe shook her head. No, the car ran out of gas. I believe we're still in Arizona. Naruto bit his lip, thinking hard. I don't think a car would be fast enough. Perhaps if we hijack an airplane. That won't be necessary, a gruff voice cut in from behind them. Naruto's eyes widened. Just like before with Athena, he hadn't sensed the newcomer approach. They turned around to see 5 centaurs, all dressed in Hawaiian shirts, and Naruto saw several cans of root beer poking out of their satchel bags. What? Bianca yelped. The lead centaur grinned. Yo, what's up? Call me Alex. I'm the leader of the Arizona chapter of the party Ponies. I hear you guys needed a lift. How did you know? Thalia asked in bewilderment. Percy suddenly chuckled. Let me guess, Chiron. Alex pointed finger guns at Percy and grinned. You got it. Locating you guys was kinda hard, but we got a small tip from this homeless dude named Fred. Naruto smiled. Thank you, Apollo. Come on, hop on, Alex said. We don't have any time to waste. Zoe leveled him with a suspicious stare. And you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart. Alex grinned. Nah, dude. Chiron promised us 10 grand, half up front, half on completion. Do you have any idea how much beer and root beer that would buy? Enough to get us hammered for days. Days. Percy muttered. They're centaurs. They have a high metabolism, Thalia muttered back. Zoe sighed. Very well. Let's go. 5 minutes, Bianca breathed. You just ran hundreds of miles. In just 5 minutes. We're awesome, aren't we? A centaur named Joey grinned. High five, girl. Bianca hesitantly gave him a high five. Distance isn't the same for centaurs, Zoe explained as she got off of the centaur's back. Excuse me, but what? Was Zoe implying what Naruto thought she was implying? Zoe nodded. Similar to Pegasi, centaurs have the ability to distort space around them when they travel. Okay, now that was flat out awesome. Naruto wondered if he could also have that ability. He really hoped so. Alright, see ya dudes, Alex grinned. And remember, if you guys ever want to party, just hit us up. Percy watched them go with a small smile on his face. Chiron's cousins are always cool. The centaurs had dropped them off on the ferry docks, per Zoe's request. We need to find Nereus, she announced. If you see an old man who smells nasty, then he's our guy. Nasty? Percy asked. You'll see. Or rather, you'll smell. This is bad, Hestia said grimly. Apollo nodded. Aphrodite exposed Naruto. The other gods are starting to ask questions, and Athena already straight up confronted him. He sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. This is exactly why I didn't want Naruto to leave. But you still let him leave, Hestia pointed out. Yeah, I did, Apollo admitted. While he was running to Camp Half-Blood, it would have been very easy for me to stop him. Why didn't you? Hestia asked curiously. Apollo shrugged. Artemis is my baby sister. When it comes to her, I only accept the best. And there is no doubt whatsoever that Naruto is the best. A mistake, in retrospect. You can't blame yourself. There was no way you could have known that Aphrodite would have detected his illusion. Apollo sighed again. Yeah, you're right. But I doubt Artemis would see it that way. Hestia winced. I would not want to be you when she gets freed. Same, Apollo agreed miserably. Then he brightened. I like your optimism though. You said when she gets freed. Not if. When. Hestia smiled. Of course. I believe that Naruto will succeed. They were both silent for a moment. But for real though, if you ever need a place to hide from Artemis, feel free to just come to me. Thank you. Chapter 8, Bane of Olympus. Naruto located Nereus almost immediately. It was impossible not to. Nereus smelled nasty. Like fish that was left rotting out in the sun for weeks. Next to garbage and refuse. Once Naruto had plugged his nose with a clever application of chakra, the same technique Kakashi-sensei used to prevent gas attacks from being effective, he quickly pointed Nereus out to the others. Are you sure? Thalia squinted. He doesn't look like a god. More like an old bum. And it was true. Nereus wore pajamas and a fuzzy bathrobe that looked like it wasn't washed in months. He was fat, with a yellowing beard. More importantly, Santa Claus, Naruto muttered hatefully. He looks like Santa Claus. Gods, I hated that man. There was a moment of silence. Naruto. Percy began tentatively. You do know that Santa Claus doesn't exist, right? Naruto frowned. Of course he exists. I've fought him multiple times before. You've fought Santa Claus? Thalia stared at Naruto incredulously. Naruto nodded. He was difficult to defeat. Nearly as powerful as the Easter Bunny, but slightly weaker than the Tooth Fairy. Bianca's eyes widened. Wait, those are real too. Thalia shook her head. No they're not. Don't listen to him. Naruto, where exactly did you fight, Santa Claus? On Christmas Eve, Naruto replied. He would break into Apollo's mansion to do nefarious things, and I would fend him off. And every single time, he's escaped with his life intact. His eyes flashed. I've only encountered the Easter Bunny once, but I will never forget it. His primary form of attack was throwing eggs. That's not too bad, Percy said. Eggs that exploded. Oh. Naruto nodded grimly. And the Tooth Fairy attempted to steal my teeth. I woke up to her on my face, pliers in her hand, ready to extract my molars. Fortunately, I was fast enough to land several blows on her, but I missed her wings so she was able to fly away and escape. Thalia, Zoe, Bianca, and Percy stared at him. I have lived for several millennia, Zoe began, but even I have never encountered such beings. But if the Greek gods are real, then what if Santa Claus and the others are real too? Percy whispered, a hint of fear appearing in his eyes. Thalia bit her lip. No. There's no way. That's impossible. Naruto suddenly broke out in a wide grin. Nah, I'm just messing with you. They were all just transformed versions of Apollo. Which just made it infinitely more satisfying when my attacks connected. They breathed sighs of relief. I can already barely handle Greek mythology, Percy grinned. Thalia nodded in agreement. How should we handle Nereus? Jump him. Percy suggested. Naruto nodded. I'm down. Let's do it. Wait, Bianca spoke up. You mean? You're going to just attack that old man? Zoe turned to her, bemused. Bianca, don't let his appearance fool you. He's a god. Oh. Right, Bianca responded sheepishly. Almost forgot. They approached Nereus, who was sitting at the end of the dock. The homeless people around them paid them no attention. A couple wearing rainbow shirts making out. A man with long hair trying to repair a guitar. A woman with a shopping cart filled with plastic flamingos. An old woman, nearly 80 years old, leaning on a cane, gazing out at the sea. Nereus, Zoe called. Nereus's head whipped around. Zoe Nightshade. He said, confused. You shouldn't be here. Why are you here? Zoe frowned. What do you mean by that? Nereus narrowed his eyes. Don't tell me you're that stupid. I know it's been centuries since we've last met each other, but come on. Did you honestly think that the Titan Lord wouldn't anticipate you coming to me for information? Oh. That wasn't good. Indeed, Thorn said in that heavy French accent of his, materializing out of nowhere. Immediately, Thalia's spear expanded, Percy uncapped his pen, Bianca and Zoe's bows appeared, and a kunai was in Naruto's hand. Thorn simply smiled. We expected this from day one. You heroes are oh so predictable. Oh, but before we do anything. Nereus, scram. Nereus looked at Zoe sadly. I'm sorry. But I must maintain my neutrality. Good luck. With that, he transformed into a goldfish and hopped into the sea. You are a fool, Thorn, Zoe growled. Did you really think coming here alone was a good idea? Naruto already single-handedly drove you off last time. Thorn smiled menacingly. Who said I was alone? Naruto got that sinking feeling. The one you get when there are a dozen laser sights playing across your chest. They had been played. Every homeless person that surrounded them drew a weapon. The 80-year-old lady suddenly looked a lot more threatening with a semi-automatic pistol in her hand. The woman reached inside her shopping cart and pulled out a machine gun. Off in the distance, Naruto could distinctly see several snipers on boats. He was a shinobi, and he hadn't expected this. You may be fast, kid, but even you aren't faster than a supersonic sniper round, Thorn called to Naruto. You move even an inch and your friends will be filled with lead. Naruto raised his eyebrows. Was that a challenge? That sounded like a challenge to me. Thorn smirked. Try me. Naruto met his gaze for a second before looking down, seemingly defeated. His legs trembled before he collapsed to his knees, his face downcast. Thalia looked at him in concern. Naruto. Are you okay? Thorn laughed. Oh, the little boy finally understands the situation he's in. Pathetic. Naruto, don't worry, Percy gripped his sword tightly. We'll get out of here alive. It's funny you think that, Thorn gloated. It'll be even more funny when I prove you wrong. Down on the ground, Naruto blocked out the sound of their conversation. Personally, he thought that his acting was a tad bit too dramatic, but it appeared Thorn and even his friends were fooled. Naruto closed his eyes and began gathering natural energy. Fortunately, Thorn had already completely ignored him by now, and was gloating at Percy and Thalia. All according to Naruto's plan. Feign weakness to get Thorn to drop his guard. Sure, it rankled Naruto's pride a little bit, but that was fine. Naruto extended his senses, and froze. What the hell? Why were there so many types of natural energy? Back in the elemental nations, no matter where Naruto was, the natural energy all felt the same. But here, there were countless types of natural energy. But how was it possible? Unless there were gods in this world, Naruto realized. Natural energy is nothing but energy that exists in the world around them. Rocks, trees, the air, the earth itself contained natural energy. But in this world, gods were the living personifications of the natural forces of the world. Which meant, Naruto's eyes widened. Natural energy was a god's energy. His theory was confirmed when he quickly identified a natural energy that felt like Artemis. It was identical, actually. The goddess of forests. And that wasn't it. He felt an energy, bright and potent, that felt like Apollo. The sun's natural energy. However, there was one form of natural energy that overshadowed the rest. Naruto shuddered. It felt as if it was slumbering, but even in its lethargic state, Naruto could clearly identify it as the strongest and most potent natural energy. The sheer power it exuded was frightening. But at the same time, Naruto sensed an immense hatred within it. At that moment, Naruto resolved to not even touch it. He didn't know what it was, all he knew was that he needed to stay far away. Naruto drew in the natural energy that felt like Artemis, gathering it and blending it with his own chakra to create Senjutsu chakra. Sage mode, Artemis style. And he drew in a sharp breath as he finally felt her. Naruto grinned in relief and happiness. Finally. But first things first. And then the Titan Lord shell, Thorn was cut off when the mortals around him collapsed, unconscious. On the boats, the snipers were knocked out as well. A moment later, there was a large boom as the sound of the sonic barrier being broken reached their ears. What? Zoe murmured in confusion. Naruto reappeared in front of them, a smirk on his face. Challenge accepted and completed. Thorn's eyes widened. What in Hades, URK? Naruto blinked as the water behind Thorn rose up and began strangling Thorn. Yo Percy, we still need information from this guy. Ask questions first, break the Geneva Convention after. Oh right, Percy rubbed the back of his head sheepishly as the water receded slightly, allowing Thorn to take shallow breaths filled with water. I got kinda pissed. What was that? Bianca's eyes were wide as she stared at Naruto. At that moment, she looked a lot like Nico. 1 second you were on the ground and the next you were in front of us and all the mortal mercenaries were incapacitated. Naruto grinned. Pretty cool, right? Bianca broke out into a smile. Cool? At the risk of sounding like my little brother, it was awesome. Zoe nodded, her eyes still slightly wide. For once, I agree. I can see now why Apollo requested you to join this quest. She then turned to Thorn. Speak, Manticore. What is the monster Artemis was hunting? I won't, Thorn choked out, tell you anything. Zoe shrugged. Very well. Percy, how well versed are you in the concept of waterboarding? A smile spread on Percy's face. I like how you think. For you see, Thorn, Zoe strolled up to Thorn, staring directly into his mismatched eyes. I am well aware that typical methods of torture do not work on monsters. If we mess up even a little bit, then you immediately disintegrate into dust. However, water is one of the few exceptions. With water, we can prolong your misery for days. Thorn laughed. You think I fear you? Compared to the Titan Lord, you are not. He was cut off when a black arrow suddenly sprouted out of his head. A moment later, Thorn screamed in agony before turning to dust. The black arrow fell to the ground with an ominous clunk. Naruto whipped his head around. He hadn't sensed the arrow approaching. He was in sage mode, but he hadn't sensed it. How was that possible? Percy immediately stomped his foot on the ground and a wall of water rose up, forming a barrier around them. Where did the arrow come from? I don't know. Naruto extended his senses out, but whoever the archer was, they must be already gone. Even though Naruto had a perfect awareness of his surroundings, unless his intuition alerts him, then Naruto wouldn't really focus on an area. It was like having the Byakugan, even though you could see everything, you don't focus on something unless something brings your attention to it. In Naruto's case, his intuition typically did that for him. In a forest, his intuition would automatically alert Naruto of something out of the ordinary, with information automatically streaming into his mind. But for some strange reason, when the archer fired the arrow, Naruto's intuition had stayed silent. And Naruto had no idea why. Mist, Zoe said grimly. The arrow was shrouded in an extremely powerful mist, which is why we didn't sense it. Oh. That explains it. Bianca knelt down to look at the arrow. Why is it black? She wondered as she reached out to pick it up. Don't touch it. Zoe hissed in warning. Bianca whipped her hand back, staring up at Zoe in shock. What? There are 2 types of divine metal, Zoe explained. The first is celestial bronze. The second is Stygian iron. Mined and forged in the underworld, cooled in the river Styx, it is an extremely powerful and lethal metal. Thalia frowned. Really? I've never heard about Stygian iron before. Zoe nodded. Lady Artemis told me about it. Unlike celestial bronze, which simply destroys a monster's physical body and returns their essence to Tartarus, with Stygian iron, a monster's essence gets absorbed into the blade. Thalia paled. What? Of course, the essence would return to Tartarus eventually, but it can lengthen the process by decades. It's for that reason that monsters universally hate Stygian iron. Zoe eyed the arrow on the ground. I reckon that thorn won't be able to reform for several decades at the very least. If it's so powerful, then why don't we use it? Bianca asked curiously. Because it's too dangerous, Zoe responded. For demigods, if we accidentally cut ourselves, then our life force would be quickly drained. It would be like fighting with a blade coated in a lethal poison, it's too risky. For gods, they don't like using Stygian iron because it originated in the underworld. Naruto blinked. That's it. Zoe shrugged. Are you really surprised? Lord Hades was kicked out of Olympus because he was the god of the underworld. Ah, right, Naruto nodded in understanding. The gods don't really like anything underworld related. Makes sense that they would stay away from Stygian iron. Precisely, Zoe confirmed. After all, Stygian iron doesn't really offer too many advantages over celestial bronze for gods. Gods don't care how long it takes for a monster to reform. Sure, Stygian iron can harm mortals, but the gods can always just materialize a steel weapon. So there are no demigods that use Stygian iron. Bianca spoke up. Zoe hesitated. Not exactly. Children of Hades are capable of using Stygian iron without harm, their life force exists in a peculiar state. To them, Stygian iron acts like any regular metal. Bianca bit her lip. And is there a chance that I'm a daughter of Hades? Zoe's eyebrows rose. No. The big three, that is, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, swore an oath to not have any more children after World War II. Bianca didn't say anything, instead staring pointedly at Percy and Thalia. You have a point, Zoe conceded. But what makes you think that you're Hades' daughter? Bianca was silent for a moment. When we were in the labyrinth, she began, I felt stronger. And I could sense everything around me. I can't really explain it, but you saw how I chose all the correct routes. Zoe hesitated. Yes, but... And, Bianca continued, her voice growing stronger, right now, I can sense this arrow in front of me. Even if I shut my eyes, I can feel it. Hades is the god of precious metals, correct? Percy and Thalia exchanged glances. Look, Bianca, Percy said gently. You don't want to be a child of Hades. Being the children of the big three. It's dangerous. Extremely dangerous. Thalia nodded in agreement. And besides, I doubt Hades broke the oath. Because if he did, then that would mean that he's a hypocrite, her eyes flashed dangerously, for sending all those monsters after me because I was a daughter of Zeus. Bianca shook her head. Guys, I know it seems strange, but the thought of me being Hades' daughter just feels right. And there's a way to test it, right? And, before they could stop her, Bianca reached out, grabbed the arrow and cut her finger with it. Or in Naruto's case, he didn't stop her because he also thought that she was the daughter of Hades. Perhaps it was a bit reckless, but then again Naruto didn't exactly have the best regard for safety when it comes to training. Must have come from when Jiraiya threw him off the cliff. See. Bianca showed them the cut. It was bleeding slightly, but other than that there were no adverse effects. I'm fine. A moment of shocked silence as the other demigods, minus Naruto, took it in. I stand corrected, Zoe said, stunned. You are a daughter of Hades. No way, Percy breathed. Thalia's hands balled up into fists. Which means, Hades sent those monsters after me because Zeus broke his oath, even though Hades himself also broke the oath. That damned hypocritical. The ground underneath them rumbled threateningly. Shut it. Thalia snapped angrily at the ground. You and both know that I'm telling the truth. Before you declare war on Hades, Percy spoke up, Naruto, Zoe, do you think it's safe to stop maintaining this barrier? Yeah, it's fine, Naruto said. The archer is gone. In fact, the archer had probably left the second he fired the arrow, because when Naruto had extended his senses, he hadn't sensed anyone. He still had no idea how that happened. Percy nodded and snapped his fingers. A second later, the barrier of water around them retreated back into the sea. My father is Hades, Bianca said in wonder. Whoa. Wait, the ground rumbling meant that Hades heard you, right? Thalia nodded. Bianca brightened. Dad? Can you hear me right now? The ground grew suspiciously quiet. He can't interact with you, Thalia sighed. Gods are forbidden by the ancient laws from interacting with their children other than special circumstances. Then her eyes narrowed. I still can't believe you, Lord Hades. With all due respect, you suck. Percy, Zoe, and Naruto tensed up, preparing for Hades to appear and pummel Thalia. But apparently, the god of the dead had some self-control, and so the only thing that occurred was a minor earthquake. Getting back on topic, Percy squinted at the sea once the ground underneath them stopped shaking. Any chance that Nereus would come back? Zoe scoffed. Knowing him, he's probably somewhere in Washington by now. Naruto exited sage mode, wasn't much of a point in staying in it, and under his henge, his eyes returned to normal. He idly wondered if the color of his eyes would be affected by using the natural energy of Artemis. It's not like he can drop the henge and see. What should we do next? Bianca spoke up. Oh, that's simple, Naruto answered. We mount a full-on frontal attack on that mountain over there. He pointed to a large mountain off in the distance that rose above the cloud layer. Zoe frowned. The Mountain of Despair. Why there? Because that's where Artemis is, Naruto replied simply. His intuition may not have warned him of the archer firing the arrow, but the second he had entered sage mode, his intuition practically exploded at him. He had sensed Artemis up there immediately. Let's go save Artemis. Wait, how do you know? Thalia squinted at the mountain. I have a thing called sage mode, Naruto explained. Whenever I enter sage mode, my senses increase exponentially. I sensed her on that mountain. No, not just that. In regular sage mode, Naruto just gained heightened senses, especially towards chakra. However, in sage mode, Artemis style, it was as if Naruto was in a forest. An intuition that approached the level of divination. Godlike senses. Naruto would have to experiment with it later. You can sense gods? Zoe asked incredulously. Naruto nodded. In sage mode, yeah. Unless they're shrouded in mist. Naruto really had to master seeing through the mist. He was halfway decent, but nowhere as good as he should be. It appeared that no matter what world he was in, illusions would always be his weak point. Mountain of Despair. Bianca spoke up. Why do they call it that? Zoe looked grim. Mount Othrys was the mountain on which the Titan Palace was located. After the war between the Titan War, Cronus's right-hand man, the general of his forces, was imprisoned up there in the ruins of the palace, on the summit, just beyond the Garden of the Hesperides. The general. Atlas, Naruto surmised. Atlas is imprisoned up there, where he holds up the sky. He paused as a thought struck him. But Artemis is there too. Zoe, what are the odds that Atlas used Annabeth to force Artemis to bear the weight of the sky? Percy raised his hand. I had a dream a few days ago where it looked like Artemis was holding up a roof of a really tall building. But in retrospect, she might actually be holding up the sky. That bastard. Atlas was going to not die, but at least get beaten up really badly before getting shoved under the sky once more. It's useless, Zoe clenched her fists tightly. The only way to get to the summit of the mountain is to get past the Garden of the Hesperides, Zoe scowled slightly as she said the name. And we can only enter the Garden of the Hesperides at twilight. Naruto blinked. What kind of stupid rule is that? We'll just defeat anyone who tries to stop us. Zoe shook her head. No, you don't understand. It is impossible for anyone to enter the garden when it isn't twilight because it doesn't exist in this reality. Naruto frowned. What do you mean? It exists in its own subdimension, Zoe explained. Just like Olympus or the underworld. At everyone's confused looks, Zoe sighed. Look, Olympus is a huge city on top of the Empire State Building, right? Thalia nodded. Yeah, it is. Have you ever wondered how no airplane has ever accidentally hit it before? Zoe asked. It's because they can't. Just like how mortals can't accidentally fall into the underworld if they drill too deep. There are different planes of reality in this world. Pocket realms, so to speak. And the Garden of the Hesperides is one such realm. Naruto nodded slowly. Essentially, this dimension had subdimensions, like Tartarus, Olympus, the underworld, and various others. They were all connected. This actually explained a lot of things. After all, chaos exists beneath Tartarus, which exists beneath the underworld, which exists beneath the earth, but Naruto knew for a fact that the primordial void did not exist in the center of the earth. However, unlike his old dimension, the realms of this world are all interconnected with numerous openings, whereas the dimensions of his old world were closed off and separated. For example, to get to Obito's dimension, you had to use the Kamui. That was the only possible way of entry. In this world, however, there were multiple entrances to the underworld, and anyone could use them, with some exceptions. An apt analogy would be using cakes. His old world was like a layer cake, in which the dimensions were clearly separated. Closed dimensions. This world, however, was like a marble cake, in which every dimension was blended in together, resulting in one big dimension with multiple openings and gateways, so traveling from realm to realm is extremely simple. Instead of being a planar reality, this world had multiple interconnected layers of reality. In other words, it was confusing as hell. Naruto doubted even he could break through if that was the case. He had never figured out how to break out of Obito's pocket dimension without the Kamui. However, he still had to try. Perhaps his chakra, a foreign entity in this dimension, would be capable of breaking through into the Garden of the Hesperides. He hoped. He still didn't understand the full extent of his newfound power. The only time the garden manifests in this reality is during twilight, Zoe continued. At any other time, you must be a god to enter the garden. Naruto tilted his head. I don't recall it being like this back in the Titan War. You're right, Zoe nodded. The gods lifted the summit of Mount Othris out of the normal reality after the war and tied it to the garden, which already existed in a state of perpetual twilight, because the summit literally became the roof of the world. It was to make it harder for heroes to get through to the summit. She looked away. Unfortunately, one foolish hero got through. Heracles, Percy said. Zoe narrowed her eyes. Yes. Him. Percy shot Zoe a knowing glance but didn't speak further. It would be a waste of time to go there right now. Zoe began walking back to the buildings. Instead, we should search for the monster Artemis was hunting. Oh. This is awkward, Naruto began sheepishly. They turned to him. What is it? Bianca asked. Well, you see. I'm a clone. They stared. Boss already ditched after he took care of the mortal mercenaries. He's probably already at Mount Othris, trying to get into the garden. Thalia blinked. Wait. The shadow clone nodded. He had thought that you would head for the gardens immediately after you finished taking care of Thorn, so he went on ahead. But don't worry, he added hastily. He left some backup. Dude. A moment later, another shadow clone appeared in a blur. Yeah. I got a dispel to send information back to boss, the shadow clone said. There, he gestured at the demigods, gonna look for the monsters. Can you help them? The other shadow clone nodded. Of course. All right. I'll leave it up to you. And the first shadow clone dispelled. The other shadow clone looked at the demigods. So. The monster. Zoe shook her head bemusedly. That is an extremely useful ability. At any rate, with Nereus gone. I doubt we'll acquire any more intel. Then how should we find out what the monster was? Bianca frowned. I mean, it's not like the monster is just going to casually walk up to us, right? Muah. Yo Percy, what the hell, man? You can't just leave me behind like that. Thalia gasped. Impossible. Bessie. Percy cried happily as a cow serpent swam up to them. It had the upper body of a calf and the lower body of a snake. How are you doing? Thalia stared at Bianca with awe and reverence in her eyes. Do you realize what you just did? Bianca drew back. No. You just employed a perfect reverse jinx, Thalia breathed. How did you even do that? Even I can't do it perfectly yet. Beginner's luck. Zoe suggested. Thalia nodded. Probably. Reverse jinx. Bianca asked confusedly. The reverse jinx technique is when you jinx yourself for your own benefit, Zoe explained. It's extremely rare with a high chance of backfiring on you. But it appears to have worked this time. Great job, Bianca. Oh. Thanks. What are you talking about? Percy frowned from where he was kneeling on the water, patting the cow serpent's head like a dog. Bessie isn't the monster. Mua. Excuse me. Are you or are you not the son of Poseidon? How can you not tell that I'm a guy? And for the last time, my name's not Bessie, it's the offio taurus. Dear gods, how thick are you? He says his name isn't Bessie. It's the offio taurus, Naruto translated. And he's a guy. Percy blinked. You can understand him. Naruto nodded. Yeah. Huh. Neat. And Percy went back to patting the offio taurus's head. Offio taurus, Zoe mused. Where have I heard that name before? Her eyes went wide with shock and fear. Oh no. Percy looked at her. What's wrong? This is the monster Artemis was hunting, Zoe breathed. My father told me this tale thousands of years ago. Whoever killed the offio taurus and sacrificed its entrails to fire would have the power to destroy the gods. Moo. Hey girl, we don't mention the S word around here. It's a trigger word. Come on, show some tact. The offio taurus doesn't like the S word, Naruto dutifully translated. Thalia stared at the cow serpent with wonder. The power to destroy the gods? How? No one knows, Zoe answered. In the first Titan War, the offio taurus was slain, but Zeus sent an eagle to snatch the entrails away before they could be tossed into the fire. I believe it was rank 4 on the top 10 close calls in the Titan War. What was rank 1? Bianca inquired. Zoe's gaze darkened. It was when the general almost single-handedly defeated all 6 gods. They only survived because the mountain spirits committed suicide and collapsed the mountain they were fighting on, causing Atlas to lose his balance temporarily, so the gods were able to escape. Mua. Hey, I deserve to be rank 2 at the very least. Give me the respect I deserve, damn it. Thalia stretched out her hand. The cow serpent went right to her like a small puppy. Thalia placed her hand on his head, patting it distractedly. But the look in her eyes. It bothered Naruto. It was the same hungry look Sasuke always got whenever he was offered the prospect of more power. Thalia. Naruto began cautiously. The power to overthrow Olympus, Thalia muttered. That's huge. Moo. Not gonna lie, you're kinda freaking me out, girl. Mind not looking at me the same way you would look at a juicy cheeseburger? Zoe shook her head. We cannot sacrifice it, Thalia. Power gained by killing the innocent. I do not know the effect it will have on you, but it surely will not be good. But can you imagine? Naruto laid his hand on Thalia's shoulder. Thalia, he said gently. There are many paths in becoming strong. This is not one of them. Zoe nodded. Indeed. I have seen better heroes than you perish because of their desire for power. Do not make the same mistake they had. Thalia hesitated, but the look in her eyes was slowly fading away. You're right, guys, she rubbed her forehead. I don't know what came over me there. She smiled down at the offio taurus. Don't worry. I won't sacrifice your entrails to fire. Moo. What did I say about the S word? Do you want me to have another episode? I'm not lying when I say it's a trigger word. What should we do with it though? Bianca frowned. I mean, as long as it's alive, then there's always the possibility that the Titans can capture him. And then it would be all over. Sea creature, Percy mused. I wonder. Be right back, guys. And then he jumped into the water, disappearing beneath the surface. They looked at each other. So what do we call you? Bianca asked Naruto. Naruto shrugged. Naruto, I guess. I'm a shadow clone, but I still retain boss's personality. Bianca nodded. Do you feel it when you die? Naruto shook his head. No. It's an odd sensation, one that I can't really describe. But it doesn't hurt or anything. And when you dispel, you send memories back to the original Naruto, correct? Zoe asked. Naruto nodded. Yeah. They fell into a silence, staring into the water and waiting for Percy's return. Have any of you met Hades? Bianca asked suddenly. Thalia and Naruto shook their heads. Zoe hesitated before nodding. I have. I've met him several times before. What was he like? Bianca asked curiously. Zoe was silent for a moment. Bitter, she finally said. Bitter, yet honorable. Hades had been cast out of Olympus. His family despised and feared him. But at the same time, Hades didn't let his anger and sadness get to him much. He still performed his duties diligently. He judged the dead fairly. And he was one of the few gods who never tried to flirt with the hunters. But then why didn't he ever talk to us? Bianca pressed on. I mean, I get that face-to-face interaction might break the ancient laws. But why didn't he at least leave a small note? To let us know that he was there, and he cared. She looked away. My entire life, I thought the only family I had was Nico. And to know that my father was there all along, and he was one of the most powerful gods, a big three. Zoe sighed before stepping close and pulling Bianca into a hug. Bianca's eyes widened. Your father cares about you, Bianca, Zoe said gently. Trust me, the gods aren't exactly the best at showing their affection. Rather terrible, actually. But that doesn't mean that they don't care. Naruto nodded in agreement. The ancient laws prevent the gods from doing many things. He should know, he lived with Apollo, after all. But they're gods, Thalia suddenly spoke up, a hint of anger in her tone. You think the ancient laws really matter? You see gods breaking oaths sworn on the river Styx itself all the time. Percy, Bianca, and I are living proof of that. So if they're capable of casually breaking the most serious oath you can make, then what's stopping them from just visiting their children? The ancient laws are different from an oath sworn on the Styx, Naruto explained. The laws were agreed upon by the council, and Zeus himself enforces the laws. And he does punish the gods who break the ancient laws. It's one of his divine duties as the king of Olympus. Breaking the ancient laws isn't something to be done lightly. Zoe nodded, stepping back from Bianca. It is risky. In fact, if Zeus found out that Apollo had helped us, then he'll probably punish Apollo. Maybe. I don't know for sure. Zeus has a soft spot for Artemis, and Apollo helped us to help Artemis. Thalia shook her head. You're just fooling yourselves. The both of you. The gods don't care. The only time they show up is when their children are dying. And then all they do is turn them into a tree, or something equally useless. Luke may have been wrong about many things, but he was right about this. The gods don't care. You're wrong, Naruto said simply. Thalia raised her eyebrows. Oh? And how do you know? I can't speak for Zeus, or the other gods, Naruto admitted. But I can speak for Apollo. He stared into Thalia's electric blue eyes. Every time his children are doing something, he tries to be there. Musical recitals. Concerts. Art galleries. Basketball games. I cannot tell you how many times he randomly burst into a song, or gods forbid, a poem, about one of his children's achievements. Thalia's eyes widened. And you know what? Naruto spread his arms. He's there for his children, even if they don't know it. Even with the ancient laws restraining his actions, he still does everything he can to be a good dad. There was a moment of absolute silence. I never knew that about Apollo, Zoe said, stunned. Thalia nodded slowly. I mean, wow. He really does all that. Naruto nodded. Yup. He suddenly smiled as he caught sight of something. And Bianca, you know how I know that Hades truly does care for you? How? Bianca asked. Naruto grinned. Look behind you. They turned around and their eyes grew wide. There was a small crack in the concrete ground. And in the middle of the crack stood a beautiful quiver full of arrows with solid black arrowheads. Stygian iron arrows. Bianca ran towards it, shocked. Dad? Is this from you? There's a note, Zoe pointed out. Sure enough, attached to the quiver was a small slip of paper. Bianca read it, then smiled uncertainly. I guess you're right, Naruto. Naruto tilted his head. What did it say? She handed him the note. Zoe and Thalia stood next to him to read it. In a really bad handwriting, it read. I'm proud of you, daughter. Coming from Hades, this is practically him saying I love you, Zoe breathed. Bianca's uncertain smile melted into a joyful one. Really? Zoe nodded. Yeah. Next to Naruto, Thalia had stiffened up angrily. Then, without saying a word, she walked back to the offio taurus, who was still in the water, swimming in circles. She knelt down, the offio taurus swimming back to her, and began patting the offio taurus on the head once more. Bianca looked at her in concern. Did I do something? She whispered. Naruto paused. I don't know her that well. Zoe. She shook her head. I have no idea. We may have to ask Percy. As if on cue, Percy burst out of the water like he was shot out from a cannon. He landed on the surface of the water. Hey guys, good news, he said happily. Dad agreed to help us out. He'll keep the offio taurus safe in his palace. Bussy, offio taurus, isn't that great? Mua. The sea god? Yeah, I can get behind that. Where's my entourage? A moment later, a whirlpool formed around the offio taurus, dragging him away. Mua. Is this supposed to happen? The whirlpool collapsed into itself, there was a flash of green-blue light, and when the water settled, the offio taurus was gone. Percy grinned. You won't believe how the negotiations with Dad went. He finally looked at them properly and saw their faces. An angry, hurt gaze on Thalia. A confused look on Bianca. Identical expressions of calm on Zoe and Naruto that covered up a slight bit of panic. Oh. What did I miss? You talked to your dad, huh? Thalia spoke up bitterly. Let me guess, he said that he was proud of you. Percy blinked. Actually, yeah. He said that I got moxie. I don't really know what that meant though. He shrugged. How did you know? Thalia laughed, a broken, harsh sound. I see. Luke and I were wrong. It's not that the gods don't care about their children. It's just that our parents don't care. She stood up and began walking back. Come on, let's go save Lady Artemis. Percy stared at her, confused, before looking at the others. What happened? He whispered tensely. Hey, Bianca, where did you get that quiver full of arrows from? Dad, she responded. He also left a note. She showed Percy the slip of paper. Percy's eyes grew wide. No way, he breathed. Hades wrote this? This is practically an I love you with 3 exclamation marks for him. His gaze darkened. I can see why Thalia would be hurt by this. At the others' confused looks, he sighed. Look at it from Thalia's perspective. From what Annabeth told me, Thalia prayed to Zeus almost every night when she was on the run with Luke and Annabeth. But Zeus never answered her. He barely showed any acknowledgement that she was even alive. But now that she's seeing Poseidon and even Hades sending their children gifts and encouraging messages and generally being halfway decent parents. He trailed off. I'll go talk to her. Percy jogged on ahead. Being a demigod is hard, isn't it? Bianca said as they watched Percy start whispering to Thalia. Zoe nodded. It is. But don't worry. As a hunter of Artemis, you don't have to worry about any of that. She smiled. After all, we're family now. And family takes care of each other. I know I'll be fine, Bianca whispered, but what about Nico? Nico D'Angelo was having the time of his life. He found out he was a demigod, which was so cool. One of his parents was a god. An actual Greek god. And he made friends. The kids at Westover Hall had all thought he was weird and uncool, but the demigods at Camp Half-Blood were actually friendly and accepting. And not only that, but he had played capture the flag with live weapons. And now, Beckendorf, the son of Hephaestus, was fitting him out for custom armor. Now see, I make it a general policy to never get the measurement of guys, Beckendorf spoke as he jotted down some notes. A small robot, an automaton, extended its limb and a laser beam hit Nico. Nico watched it interestedly as the red dot traced down his arm. Unfortunately, when I craft custom armor, I kind of have to. The laser beam shut off and some numbers flashed onto the automaton's display. So here's the deal, Beckendorf continued. After I'm done, I destroy all the notes I made of your measurements. In return, you never mention the fact that I measured you. Especially to the girls. Especially to Silena. Deal. Nico nodded happily. He didn't really understand how the automaton worked, but apparently it was able to take measurements using a laser. All right. What did you want again? Beckendorf pulled out a screwdriver and a few metal trinkets that Nico didn't know the name of. Nico's eyebrows furrowed in thought. Hey, you said you would make me 10 sets of armor, right? Beckendorf crossed his arms. I can either make you 10 sets, or I can make you a single set of armor with everything you could possibly ever wish for all crammed into it. And I'll even repair it for you if it gets broken. 1 set of armor is fine, Nico said immediately. He didn't really want to trouble Beckendorf to make him 10 sets of armor. Even though Nico could wear a different set of armor for each day of the week if he had 10 sets. Besides, Nico understood the importance of quality over quantity. It didn't matter how many dryads you had in your deck, against a single god, they would all be toast. Beckendorf nodded approvingly. Do you have anything in mind? Make it black, Nico suggested. With orange designs on it. The same colors as Naruto. Beckendorf rolled his eyes. Aesthetics are for last. Let's focus on the important bits first. How about this? I'll name off some features, and you tell me if you want it or not. Okay. What's your fighting style? Nico blinked. You're pretty small, Beckendorf mused. Anything too heavy would only weigh you down. I doubt you can get into the tanky fighting style that the Ares cabin favors, so the armor would have to be pretty lightweight. He began scribbling on a piece of paper. How flexible are you, Nico? What? I can touch my toes, I guess? What does that matter? I know campers who integrate acrobatics and whatnot into their fighting style, Beckendorf explained. For those campers, I have to use an extremely flexible material for their armor. After all, you can't exactly do a back arch if you have a thick metal chest plate on. Nico's eyes widened in comprehension. I don't really have a fighting style yet, he confessed. But I want to learn Naruto's. Beckendorf's eyebrows rose in interest. Naruto? He crossed out the rudimentary drawing on the paper. If you're going to fight like Naruto, then traditional armor is not the one for you. In fact, I think I'll use my Hunters of Artemis armor blueprints. Hunters of Artemis armor blueprints. Theoretical drafts I had created a few years back, Beckendorf clarified. I brainstormed some armor ideas that would preserve speed, agility, and maneuverability while also providing adequate protection. How does that sound? Nico nodded slowly. Would it allow me to fight like Naruto? Beckendorf scratched his head. I've never seen Naruto actually fight before. However, I do know that Naruto doesn't like to wear armor. I overheard bits of his conversation before Capture the Flag, so I'm willing to bet that his fighting style hinges on not having anything weigh him down. The armor I have in mind for you would do just that. Sure, why not? Nico shrugged. All right. Now I just need you to sign a few forms to release me and Camp Half-Blood from all responsibility. This is awesome, Nico breathed. Beckendorf grinned. Pretty cool, right? Nico admired the armor, although armor was a bit of a misnomer. It was as flexible as silk, and it was all black with some orange designs. If Nico didn't know any better, he'd think that it was just a normal sweater and pants. I wove celestial bronze threads, extremely rare and expensive, by the way, into silk. It's not that strong, but it will stop all piercing and slashing attacks. Of course, you'll still bruise heavily if someone stabs you with a spear, but at least you won't have a hole in your stomach. Why don't all demigods use something like this? Nico asked as he quickly put it on. Beckendorf shrugged. Celestial bronze armor absorbs force better. All the celestial bronze threads does is prevent anything from piercing through, it doesn't negate the impact. Huh. So which is better? Beckendorf shrugged again. It depends on the user. For you, I would personally say celestial bronze threads, simply because normal armor would just weight you down. Not to mention how you said you wanted to fight like Naruto, who doesn't use armor. Finished donning his armor, Nico looked down at himself. The material was cool and lightweight, not heavy and sagging like the armor he had worn the other night. And it fit him perfectly, adhering to his skin effortlessly. Hey Beckendorf, you got a knife? Yup. Beckendorf handed Nico a knife. Nico took a deep breath in preparation. Beckendorf's eyes flashed with alarm. Wait, what are you going to? Then Nico stabbed himself in the stomach as hard as he could. It hurt, like it had when one of the kids at Westover Hall punched him in the stomach. However, Nico looked down. The knife didn't pierce through. The armor didn't even look scratched. Nico grinned through the pain. Thank you so much, Beckendorf. Beckendorf blinked slowly, as if he wasn't comprehending what Nico had just done. Then he said, almost mechanically, don't mention it. Seriously, don't. To anyone. With his new armor, Nico felt almost invincible. Sure, he knew that realistically, every camper here could still beat him up, but still. At least he wouldn't be beat up that badly. He wondered how Bianca was doing on the quest. What if she, Nico dismissed those thoughts immediately. Both Naruto and Percy had promised to protect Bianca. And even though he didn't really like Zoe, Nico admitted that she was pretty strong too. Thalia too. In fact, the entire quest was stacked. 2 children of the Big Three, the lieutenant of the Hunters of Artemis, and Naruto. It was like having the cards of Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, and Cronus. The team was overpowered. Bianca was fine. Speaking of the Hunters of Artemis. They were currently out in the forest, doing hunter things. Chiron had forbade all the campers from entering the forest, but that didn't stop Travis and Connor from sneaking in. After they had regained consciousness in the infirmary, they revealed that the hunters were training extremely hard. Sparring, target practice, and other training stuff. Clearly, the incident with Artemis being captured had inspired them all to grow stronger so that they could defend their mistress from future dangers. Or at least, that's what Chiron had theorized. Maybe the hunters were all just really violent or stuff. At any rate, Nico had to ask the hunters something. He knew that he would be disobeying Chiron, but oh well. Chiron didn't scare him. Compared to Bianca, Chiron was nothing. He waited until he was certain that no one was watching before slipping into the forest. He still had the small bronze knife Beckendorf had given him. He gripped it tightly, his eyes darting around. If a monster came, then he should be fine. He had his new custom armor. Fortunately, no monster appeared, and Nico safely made his way over to where the hunters were training. He crouched in the shadows of a tree, mentally rehearsing what he was going to ask. Nico wanted to find out what the Hunters of Artemis's visitation policy was. He knew the Hunters of Artemis didn't allow boys to travel with them, but was he allowed to visit on the holidays? Would Bianca be allowed to visit him? He gritted his teeth unconsciously. The Hunters of Artemis stole Bianca from him. She was his sister. She was supposed to be there for him. She was his family. But she left him for those sister-stealing girls. Nico really needed to learn some cuss words. And now, Nico is forced to find out the visitation policy for visiting his own sister. Needless to say, Nico didn't like the Hunters of Artemis very much. However, as he watched them train, he admitted that it would be pretty cool to be a hunter. Immortality, increased speed, and agility, everyone accepting you for who you are. It was a good package. If only they didn't ban boys. There were only 9 hunters, but it was as if there were double that because of how fast they were moving. Nico watched in awe as one of them performed a backflip while firing 3 arrows. The arrows streaked forward and slammed into the center of the makeshift targets they had set up. Whoa, Nico abruptly shook his head. No. The hunters of Artemis are bad. They took Bianca away from him. They didn't like him because he's a boy. Well, that's fine. Nico didn't like them either. Nico took a deep breath, put on his serious face, then walked forward, and froze when an unholy sound hit him. Fear and terror took over Nico's mind as primal instincts told him to run. He staggered backwards but his muscles refused to obey. He was afraid. He was going to die. He was going to die. He was going to die. Oh man. Haven't done that in a while. A satyr materialized into existence in the middle of the hunters. The hunters, however, didn't react. Having been right next to the source of the sound, they were all frozen. A hunter who was in the middle of a complex set of acrobatics crashed to the ground. She didn't even blink. A woman materialized as well. She had torch earrings on. I have to say, this was easier than I had expected. All it took was some panic from you to destabilize their mentals, and then I just used the mist to incapacitate them entirely. She smiled as she walked up to the nearest hunter, touching her cheek. The hunter didn't react at all. The satyr chuckled. Nico noticed that the satyr had multiple machines hooked up to him. The machines you see in hospitals. Ah, Hecate. You scare even me sometimes. What did you do to them? Hecate shrugged. Currently, they all think that they're still training and that everything is normal. She smirked. So much for the hunters of Artemis. Taken out by 2 minor gods. I mean, we were shrouded in 6 layers of mist, the satyr shrugged. And it's not as if they had any reason to suspect an attack in the middle of Camp Half-Blood. Hecate chuckled. Fair enough. The satyr looked around despondently. You know, there are a lot of satyrs at this camp still looking for me. Pan, the god of the wild. I wonder how they'll react when they see how far I've fallen, he muttered bitterly. It's the Olympians' fault, Hecate consoled. If they truly wanted to, then they could have easily prevented you from fading. But they don't care. After all, you're just a minor god. To them, you're disposable. Pan sighed. I don't know. It just feels like I'm letting all the satyrs down. He gazed at his life support machines for a second. Whatever. Let's go. Hecate nodded, snapping her fingers. The hunters all stiffened before they began marching in unison, an illusion compelling their minds to move. I have to say, it's a rather ingenious plan. Artemis isn't here to protect them. Not only are we eliminating enemies, but it also has the added bonus of providing 9 demigods to hold up the sky in rotating intervals. I can see why they call Cronus the Crooked One. Pan began walking and his life support machines floated alongside him. While everyone's busy freaking out about Artemis, Cronus is already 20 steps ahead. The hunters of Artemis are powerful, and removing them this early on would greatly increase the Titan Lord's odds of victory. Indeed. They began leaving, the hunters walking like zombies behind them. Nico was still frozen, partly out of fear, partly out of shock at what he just heard. Artemis being captured was a distraction to get rid of the hunters of Artemis. And Nico is the only one who knows. What should he do? Go after them? No, there's no way that he would win in a fight. They were gods, and he was new. Should he go back into camp and get help? No, that would be too slow. By the time they believed him and got here, the hunters would be long gone. What would Naruto do? Go after the hunters and save them. The answer arrived in Nico's mind all at once. Naruto wouldn't wait around, he would go after them, beat up the 2 gods, then rescue the hunters. Could Nico do it? Perhaps not. But he still had to try. And so Nico finally broke free of the fear rooting him down and began sprinting after the hunters. He had no plan. He had no experience. He had no backup. And he was about to fight against 2 gods. All he had were sheer guts and will and the desire to be like Naruto and Percy. Bianca was going to kill him. Naruto sprinted around impatiently. Where the hell was the garden? The moment he had entered Sage mode, he had sensed Artemis immediately. He had quickly knocked out the mortal mercenaries, left several shadow clones behind, then immediately went on ahead to the mountain. He had thought it would be simple enough, get up to the top, defeat anyone and everyone who got in his way, then free Artemis. But it wasn't that simple. When he had arrived, there was nothing. At the top of the mountain, there were only trees and rocks and stuff. No Artemis. Nothing. And then one of his shadow clones had dispelled, sending him the information that apparently you could only get to the summit through the Garden of the Hesperides, which only appeared at twilight. And it existed in its own realm. What the hell? Naruto resorted to just walking around and randomly attacking the air with a Rasengan, hoping to break past the fabrics of reality. It didn't seem to be working, sadly. He knew that the gods could arrive in the Garden of the Hesperides whenever they wanted, so there must be a secret entrance. Or maybe they just teleported. That must be it. The gods simply teleported into the Garden of the Hesperides whenever they wanted. Whatever the case, Naruto was for sure not going to wait until twilight. Artemis was right there. Naruto could sense her. But he couldn't reach her. It was extremely vexing. Both the garden and the apex of Mount Othris were lifted out of this dimension and existed in their own realms. And the only way to enter was during twilight. Naruto didn't know how to travel through dimensions. He didn't have the Kamui or the Rinnegan. He could theoretically throw something together with seals, but that would take way too long. There had to be a way to bypass this obstacle. Some jutsu. Wait. Perhaps the solution didn't lie in trying to brute force his way through with chakra but rather trying to get around it within the rules of this world. Instead of wasting the time to figure out a hack or a cheat, Naruto should just find a loophole or an exception like he always did. He had lectured Obito to never take the shortcut, but here he was, trying to look for a shortcut that may not even be there. Nope. No longer. That's not the Naruto way. However, if he was going to beat this within this world's rules. Naruto crossed his arms, his eyebrows furrowed in thought. The gods had lifted the garden and the peak of Mount Othris out of the normal space-time to prevent heroes from easily reaching Atlas. That meant that divine power was used. But how? What spell could the gods have used? They didn't have the power of chaos, who could create dimensions like Tartarus or Erebus with a single thought. All the gods could have done was... Oh. Naruto's eyes widened in revelation. He was so stupid. This entire time, he had thought that the gods had used a spell to lift the area out of space-time. A jutsu equivalent. But it was so much simpler than that. Naruto couldn't believe he didn't think of it. He closed his eyes and entered Sage mode again. Once again, he could sense Artemis up at the summit along with several others. And just a few hundred feet away from Naruto, he could sense 5 beings. That must be the Hesperides and Laden, the dragon tasked with guarding the garden. Naruto quickly made his way over, crossing the distance in a second. He could sense them around him. But he couldn't see them. He couldn't touch them. He couldn't hear them. Reality only exists when it is being observed. None of his senses worked. Except for his intuition screaming at him that they were there in his sage mode. And that was enough. They are there. The Garden of Hesperides was right around him. He was in the Garden of Hesperides. And the mist around him shattered. Fighting on an empty stomach was just asking for trouble, which is why Zoe led them to the nearest sandwich shop and bought some food, manipulating the mist so the cashier would think they paid. Low blood sugar has led to the deaths of too many demigods, Zoe informed them. Always make sure to eat before battle. Hunger is the enemy. Hey, do you even eat? Percy asked Naruto curiously as he bit into his sandwich. Naruto shook his head. I'm a shadow clone, a construct made up of chakra. Then can I have yours? Naruto passed his sandwich over to Percy, who took it gratefully. Should we go to the mountain now? Thalia scanned their surroundings, looking for a car to hotwire. Thankfully, after her talk with Percy, she seemed to have returned to her normal self, although she did cast a few glances towards the quiver when she thought that no one was looking. Zoe nodded. Yes. There is nothing left us to do besides saving Lady Artemis. The offio taurus is safe with Poseidon. Can you acquire transportation for us please? Thalia nodded. On it. She headed over to the nearest car and began picking the lock. We're early by demigod standards, Percy remarked. Typically, we're only supposed to arrive at the last minute. But a full day? The winter solstice isn't until tomorrow. It's unthinkable, Zoe agreed. I mean, is it just me, or is this a little too easy? We didn't even have a near-death experience yet on this quest. Bianca blinked. Do you want a near-death experience? No, of course not, Percy replied. But it scares me when we have had none. It makes me think that all of our bad luck is being saved up and will be unleashed all at once at the very end. Zoe tilted her head. Considering the fact that we'll have to fight the general, it's not a bad prediction. Percy winced. Right. How strong is Atlas, really? Bianca asked. Zoe hesitated. He's the second strongest Titan after the Titan Lord himself. We just have to pray to the gods that he'll be prideful enough to not enter his divine form for mere mortals. Oh yeah. If we even look at him, then we'll disintegrate. Percy was interrupted by Zoe shaking her head. No. Atlas is a Titan. If he enters his divine form, then we'll disintegrate in his very presence. Naruto raised his eyebrows. An area of effect disintegration effect. Good luck, boss. Percy paled. What? Zoe nodded. We'll just have to rescue Artemis immediately and hope that she'll be able to fight him off. And that backup would come. Backup would be nice, Percy agreed bleakly. Father, I'm not saying that you should go down there personally, Apollo paced around the throne room agitatedly. But at least toss down a few lightning bolts on Atlas. Zeus stared at him with an unimpressed stare. You know how I feel about interference in mortal affairs. Damn it, this is no longer a mortal affair. This is Atlas. The general of the Titan army. Apollo threw up his arms. Do you honestly think Artemis and a few demigods would be able to stop him? Zeus crossed his arms. A god shouldn't do a hero's job for them. Saving Artemis isn't our duty, it's theirs. Apollo blinked. Father, Atlas once took on all 6 elder Olympians and nearly won. Not my problem. You know the rules as well as I do. Obey them, Zeus commanded. Understand. There was a brief battle of wills. Zeus won, of course. He always did. One of the perks of having the Master Bolt right next to his throne. Fine, Apollo's form glowed golden before he entered his divine form. I'll do as you wish. But Apollo. Zeus called. What? Apollo snapped. Zeus's expression was stony and stern, but a small twinkle appeared in his electric blue eyes. While the god Apollo isn't allowed to do anything. Fred isn't a god, so he can do whatever he pleases. Not that I know who Fred is, of course. Apollo's eyes widened in shock before he grinned. Thank you, father. And then the twinkle was gone and Zeus was serious again. Now leave. I have an annual council meeting to prepare for, and it's going to be a massive pain. Apollo materialized in San Francisco in his Fred form once more. He didn't really like going incognito, he preferred to expose his awesomeness to as many people as he could, but when he had to, he would. Apollo. Apollo whirled around, surprised that someone recognized him, then his breathing stopped. You. What are you doing here? How did you even know where I would appear? She laughed. You're as predictable as always, dear. Sit down. We need to talk. Apollo hesitated before shaking his head. Sorry, beautiful, but I can't. I have business to attend to. It's about Artemis. Apollo focused intently on the woman in silver. In which case, tell me everything. Selene. Selene nodded. It all started when I got a message from Prometheus. That's it for part 4. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.